Sure. All right, cool. I am so honored to have someone I have been knowing now since 2000 and no 2000 like 11, right? Has it been 10 years
Mhm.
now? Um,
Yeah.
so without further ado, I'm gonna let you introduce yourself, and here it is, another episode of talking about graduate school discussion in order to try to encourage and inspire individuals to apply to grad school, especially in psychology and psychology related fields. So without further ado, I'll let you introduce yourself.
My name is Jenna Schwartz, and I am a fourth year PhD school psychology candidate. I like saying candidate because I'm that level. So,
All right, cool. So our experience goes back like 10 years. I think I was working on my PhD at the time. I still
mhm.
cannot say that, hey, 10 years ago, I was working on my PhD. Wow. Um, and I was working a part-time job at a halfway house. I think I applied to do like a night job, so I could make some extra money and same time working with the population that at the time I thought I'd be working with for a little bit longer. And they end up giving me a drug treatment counselor job. And I was working filling in for people from the full-time therapist. And here it is, come this master level student who wanted to get some experience in the field of psychology. And that's where we met together at Thurgood Marshall Halfway House in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, when I was an employee of Wisconsin Community Services, I think it was.
Mhm.
So here it is, 10 years later. I am so happy that you are about to complete your PhD in school psychology, and be a school psychologist and psychologist and go out there and do great things. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So what I really want to do, right, is really just talk about what led you to applying for a PhD, right? So, again, 10 years ago, you was working on your master's degree. So kind of talk about your master's degree completion, working, and applying to a PhD program, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, I wish I had one of those stories that was like a straight shot, but it's not. It's so jagged and curvy. Because yeah, I thought I was going to be working with adult male prisoners, and that's what I started at Thorogood as my internship in my undergrad program, and just stayed there because I loved working there. I loved working with that population. But then when I got my master's degree, I decided to move to Austin, Texas, just to expand my horizon as far as my
Hmm.
experiences in life. And when I got there, I started working at Travis County Correctional Facility in their alcohol and drug program. So I was still working with adult male prisoners, but they weren't paying me. It was volunteer work, and he was trying to help me figure out the licensing in Texas because it is completely different, and you can't really do anything without a license.
Right.
Um, so I ended up needing a job. Like, you have to pay for stuff. Like, you can't just like not work. So I ended up, I got an email from my master's program telling me that people with a master's degree can work as a psychometrist at a hospital, and that
Hmm.
does testing. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll look this job up. And I ended up getting a job then at Dell Children's Medical Center in the neurology department, or neuropsychology, that works with kids with neurological disorders such as epilepsy, autism, traumatic brain injury, and other medical conditions. Um, Honestly, I took the job because I needed a job. I didn't want to work with children. I hated kids at the time. I was like, no, 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 this is not going to work for me. But I needed a job. So I was like, I'll take it.
Right.
Um, but then, like, as my supervisors there were like, Jenna, like, you're amazing with kids. Like, you really should reconsider like what you're doing.
Yeah.
Um, and finally, I just, there was no place to move up from there. it was either PhD or you're a psychometrist kind of
Right.
for the rest of your life. And I couldn't figure out how to do the licensing in Texas for the prison. So I finally was just like, I have to go back for my PhD. So it was
Yeah.
I was kind of thrown into it. Like there was no place for me to go except for PhD or completely get out of psychology.
Right.
So I applied for my PhD. That was the first time I applied for my PhD.
Mm.
And I applied only to, I think like counseling and clinical programs. So I only applied to 3 programs.
Mm-hmm.
Did not get in. I got rejected. I figured out I did the application wrong. I was like, I just didn't follow the directions. I did it totally,
Right.
I half-assed it. So then I decided, okay, I'll just keep working and see if I can move my way up here. And I was hitting that like ceiling, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, let's try one more time. Let's try again. So I applied again to clinical and counseling programs, Sam Houston in Texas specifically, because they have a really great forensic program.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get in again. And I was like, okay, I need to do something different here. If I want to work with adult male prisoners, I have to work with adults, not kids. And this is like 3 years of me working with kids. So I figured that was the reason why like I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't getting into grad school. So moved back home and got a job as a psychometrist working with 0 to 100 years old. So still
Wow.
doing the neuropsych testing, but this was more Alzheimer's, dementia, schizophrenia, more adult focused assessment.
Mm-hmm.
But I still just kept gravitating towards kids. Like I love kids. I love being a goofball with them. I love just, they just get my sense of humor. You can joke with them.
Right.
I would joke with adults and they'd be like, excuse me, this is a serious thing. And I'm like, relax, just like have fun with it. And they're like, no, this is serious. So
Right.
I just decided, all right, I think I need to do the kids route. Like,
Yeah.
so I told myself one more time of applying for PhD programs. And at that time I applied to like 19. I was like, I'm going
Wow.
all out. Yeah,
Wow.
I went all out. I saved money. I was working like 3 jobs at the time to save money to apply. And I applied to counseling, clinical, school. It was forensic route, the alcohol and drug route, and then the school psych route.
Right.
And I was going to let the universe tell me, where am I
Right.
supposed to be?
Right.
And that's how I ended up in school
Wow.
psych. And the reason I ended up taking school psych was because they really do a lot as far as like the testing
Mm-hmm.
experience with kids. And kids spend a lot of their time in the schools, and I need to know what's going on in those schools in
Right.
order for me to ultimately end up working in a hospital
Mm-hmm.
and giving recommendations to schools. I need to know what's going on in them
Yeah.
first before I
Right.
can do that.
Right. And I think
Yeah.
that's very interesting, right? It's one of I think a follow-up question when it comes to school psychology, because oftentimes I've been exposed to school psychologists who have master's degrees and not PhDs, right? And as a psychologist with a PhD, you know, sometimes I feel some type of way, not saying that those master level clinicians who are classified as school psychologists aren't great human beings and great at what they do and have a passion for it. But when we start talking about the full scale of psychological evaluations and understanding certain, psych testings require a different academic or education skill set, I'm like, okay, are we really benefiting these children by having master level clinicians, be called school psychologists? Can they really do the full plethora of, psych testing for these kids? And I'm just curious to your point of view on that.
Yeah, so the master level school psychs that I've interacted with, they're very much that the cognitive and the achieve. Like they put those two together to figure out if there's a specific learning disorder or emotional
Right.
disturbance, they focus on that. And when you go the PhD route, we expand on that. Like,
Okay.
they say, oh, there's working memory issues. Well, we know working memory is part of the frontal lobe, which is then executive functioning. Well, there is something more going on with that executive functioning than just working memory that comes from the cognitive assessment. So the PhDs take it that little step further,
Right.
as far as more of that brain piece. Like, we really look at, motor coordination, memory, speech and language. Like, we look at we take that whole assessment piece.
Okay.
But the master level students, and the LSSPs here in Texas that I've worked with, they're really good at like those two assessments. They put them together. They specialize in the eligibility criteria for the schools, which is
Got you.
completely different than what we do as LPs. We do the DSM and that medical kind of model. They do eligibility, which it's just for the schools. How can we get them services in the schools?
Got you. Got you. Got you. So there is a benefit to having mass level school psychologists, but also, school psychologists with PhDs. Are you guys also in the school system, or, I think we'll go into your internship, your pre-doctoral internship that you need to do, kind of talk about that in school psychology. So, we can, so being in your PhD program in school psychology, what kind of experiences have you had clinically, right, that's prepared you for your pre-doctoral internship? And we'll talk about that, the pre-doctoral internship soon.
Yeah. So the school psychology, which I didn't know this, when you think of school psychology, you think they're in the schools.
Right.
But actually, school psychology just means that we focus on child and adolescent. Like, it is a
Mm,
clinical child like focus, but we do a rotation in the schools so that I get that familiarity with the eligibility criteria, what's going on in the schools, how, services are done in the schools. But school psych people, we can work anywhere, community health, hospitals, we can go anywhere. And I think that makes us very versatile. And that's why I picked school psych. But our clinical experiences, besides that one rotation in the schools, look identical to a clinical or counseling program. The
mm,
counseling program here, specifically, we do the same rotations they do, except
okay.
for 1 year we're in the school and they're not.
Okay.
Um, but for me, because I was interested in that neuropsych piece, and testing is just my jam, I love
Right.
testing. I sought out additional pracs at San Antonio Children's Hospital in the neuropsych
Nice.
department. So I did neuropsych testing for him for, I believe, a semester. I also currently, right now, I'm at MD Anderson Children's Cancer Hospital, and that's doing more of a ped psych rotation where I work with kids inpatient and outpatient.
Mm,
And then I also am in a outpatient psychiatry clinic as well.
wow.
So I took it a little step further than what most people do. But that's because I want hospital. I want that neuropsych piece. So you kind of have to do a little bit extra with that school degree, because people do look at that and go, "Oh, school, you want to be in a school?" And it's like,
Right.
no, 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 no. That's not all we do. We do so
Right.
much more.
Right. Right. Well, that's good for me, right? Because I'm a learner, right? Because my PhD is in counseling psychology, as you know, and I took a class over at when I was at Marquette. I took a class over at UW Milwaukee. I forget what class it was, but it was an amazing teacher. She ended up leaving, and her and her husband went overseas to kind of like work in a different country. I thought was pretty phenomenal. But it was a whole bunch of school psychology PhD students in that class as well too. So that was like my first exposure to PhD level school psychologists, which I thought was pretty cool. So I appreciate you for clarifying that.
Yeah, it's something I didn't know until my mentors at UW-Madison.
Hmm.
She said that they prefer to hire school psych people in the neuropsych department for
Nice.
peds neuropsych because of that school component, and we
Right.
know how to write to the schools.
Right.
What I also didn't know is, as a school psych, I can get licensed as a school psychologist and an LP. So my reports will be transferable in the schools, and the kids don't have to go through testing again by a licensed school psychologist. Because technically, I'd be a double licensed individual. So
Right.
my reports will work well in the
Right.
schools. So I
Right.
was like,
Yeah. And you've already taken the EPPP, right? But at least I know you passed at the master level years ago.
yeah,
So do you have to take the EPPP again or?
yep, I'll
Okay.
have to take it again to reach that PhD level. Yeah.
Okay. Well, at least you've been exposed to the EPPP already. I don't know. You have to take the new EPPP. I think it's like a part 2 to it now.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
so nervous.
yeah, you'll do fine. You'll do fine. I just speaking of EPPP made me nervous. So, so cool. So, can you tell me a little bit about your research and your dissertation, real quick?
Yeah, I think, again, because I figured out what I wanted to do at 30 years old and I had all these experiences before going into grad school, I had connections. And so I reached out to Dell Children's Hospital and UWM and I said, hey, like, I need dissertation data. I don't want to
Yeah.
collect it. Do you have data I can have?
Right.
And I was fortunate enough that Dr. Herman and Dr. Jones at UW-Madison were like, we have longitudinal data on newly diagnosed kids with epilepsy.
Hmm.
What do you want to do with it? And
Yeah.
so my dissertation is on reading skills with children with newly diagnosed epilepsy. What I found is that, there's so many different skills that go into reading, but when you look at the research, a lot of people group them all together. Like they'll
Hmm.
just take the skills of fluency,
Right.
decoding, word identification, and just put it into one construct of reading.
Hmm.
But that doesn't help us figure out, well, why are kids with epilepsy failing?
Right.
And when I say failing, when I was a psychometrist, I noticed that their reading was okay. It wasn't
Yeah.
good, but it wasn't bad. But as I've been in my school psych program, I learned that if you don't have reading, you're going to keep failing as you get older.
Yeah.
And reading has everything to do with our daily life. You have to read stop signs, menus, you have to read manuals of your car, or if you get a new car, like
Right.
contracts. You have to have that reading down pat. And
Right.
so I decided to separate the reading skills and look at them over time longitudinally and compare them to a control group of age matched norms and see if there is a significant difference in their growth. And so far I am finding, yeah, there is. And
Nice.
so, it may not be a huge difference, but
Hmm.
my assumption is over time that small difference will get bigger and bigger and bigger
Yeah.
and then contribute to low quality of life.
Hmm.
So that's, I took my experiences with what I'm learning plus, what the data I had and kind of put
Right.
it all together into my dissertation.
Yeah. So, good luck with that. I tell you, the best advice I got when I was doing my dissertation was, the best dissertation is a completed dissertation, right?
Yeah.
So, just get it done, right? Because the faster you get it done, the faster you can get on with your life.
Hmm.
Because nobody wants to be ABD. Um,
Yeah.
and sometimes that happens for, life throws us curveballs. The universe has a way of doing it, right? But the best dissertation is a completed dissertation.
Yeah.
Just remember that. And then so moving from your dissertation there, right? So the last step, so not only dissertation, but the last step of completing a PhD is completing a pre-doctoral internship. And recently, match day has come and gone. Everything leading up to it is nerve-wracking. I never forget, like selection, I'll call it selection Sunday, when we sit there, you have the last day you have to rank all your sites. And then you have to wait till a time, I think, is it February, early February?
The third Friday in February.
Yeah, where you find out your fate, right?
Hmm.
And then so you recently found out your fate, and I believe you're going back to the Midwest.
Yeah.
So you want to kind of talk about that process and where you're going?
Yeah, again, it wasn't a straight shot. I because I came in already with my master's and my PhD program, I tried to apply to internship a year early, and I got rejected in phase one and in phase two.
Mm.
So this time around I did the same thing as I did with applications. I applied to 25, 35 different places.
Wow.
And I ended up getting at least 22 interviews.
Nice.
And thank God everything was virtual, because I was able to schedule that many interviews in the month of January to
Mm,
really have a selection of 15 places that all matched my wants and needs. But yeah, I ended up matching at the Children's Hospital of Michigan in their pediatric neuropsychology rotation,
mhm.
which I'm extremely excited about it. Again, it has everything that I'm looking for, and it's even going to challenge me a little bit more. But yeah, that process was hard. Like it's really stressful. And yeah, I think the first year I actually was able to do the traveling, where I traveled to like 6 states in 3 weeks
Mm.
and did all these interviews, and the whole rent a car, drive 2 hours, do the interview, then drive 2 hours back, get on a flight to get to another one. That was stressful.
Yeah.
But this time, doing it even back to back virtually took a
Mhm.
lot out of me.
Yeah.
Um, and then, yeah, the waiting game of just counting down. And I used my support system of people that I had, of like, let's text every day, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
And then at 7 a.m., you get that email that says, congratulations, or I'm sorry to inform you, but
Yeah.
I got the congratulations. I was like, yes, like,
Yeah.
yay.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's a process that I feel like a lot of schools gloss over. Like when I was applying for grad school, I always knew, okay, there's an internship. And I
Mhm.
thought, okay, like, okay, I apply and I get
Yeah.
one, like not a big deal. But they don't tell you that, no, it's a bottlenose. Like there are 3,000 other students applying for these positions, and they're interviewing 10 people.
Mhm.
So that's 150 applications, and they pick 30 people to interview, and then, or maybe 10 people to interview, and it's one spot. And so
Mhm.
you're just like, what is, like, this is not,
Right.
you have to be prepared for, it's not as easy as your that college internship, or
Right.
that something else. It's not what you
Yeah.
expect.
Yeah. It is definitely an experience, and I think it's like, especially being in your PhD program, anywhere from 3, 4, 5 years. And it's like the culminating event besides your dissertation is like getting on an internship. And then it's like we're applying for graduate school all over again. Because
Yeah.
and I believe, I don't know if they, I know a couple of years APA was really encouraging, I think it's APIC, to have additional APIC accredited programs join the internship process. Because in order to get licensed, a lot of times you have to do an APIC, internship. So a lot of those different nuances you learn after you go to graduate school. And I,
Yeah.
I think that could be a whole different conversation about, accreditation, right? Because you have a lot of programs out there. You can get your PhD online, but it's not APA accredited, right? So trying to get licensed in various states, so it takes a little bit more work if you go to a non-accredited university. And then you go to a non-accredited, if you're at a non-accredited university, trying to get an accredited internship is that much more, demanding. And then talk about the financial burdens that go along with it. So I always really, it's one of the reasons why I really want to provide this information to students, is say, hey, listen, the more because knowledge is power.
Yeah.
And then, I didn't know a lot of programs, right, offer different stipends for different students. So yeah, will you take out student loans in graduate school, PhD programs? Yes, but depending on where you go, that's also an advantage with different stipends that you get. But then the stipends go along with, a tuition or a research assistantship, or having to be an assistant in a class and teaching classes and things like that. So just a lot of different things that I think we need to not expose in a bad way, but just bring to light so people can have more informed decisions while encouraging individuals to apply for graduate school.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
yeah, because our program didn't help us out. So, I mean, you have to pay like $600 for 15 applications, and then any beyond that is $50 an application. So,
Yeah.
and then if they don't, because of COVID, it was virtual this year, but last year I think I spent like over $3,000 on airfare, hotels, renting cars, making sure my suit looked nice every time. And, you still have your schoolwork to do and your practicum to do
Right.
and still all this stuff. And yeah, it was an expense that I didn't know.
Yeah.
And now I go out of my way to tell the incoming cohort, like, start saving your money now. Like,
Yes.
just start saving now,
Yes.
because that's
Yes.
something you don't recognize is going to be a huge cost.
Agreed. I think that's when I became the one-way flight, navigator, right? So instead of doing round trip flights, I was like, okay, I look at the internship site, what are the closest cities, and I never forget interviewing at a federal prison in Tallahassee, and flying to Tallahassee was crazy expensive, right? And then I think um, Pensacola was even more expensive, and the next city was Jacksonville, but it was like a little over 2 hour drive from Jacksonville to Tallahassee. And then I had like a long layover in Chicago, which I ended up missing my connecting flight. I slept in a
Oh,
hotel in Chicago. I got to Jacksonville a little late. Interview started like at 9. So I emailed, this is before, so I emailed the training director at the site that I was interviewing the next day. Again, federal prison. I had already interviewed at one federal prison. So I understood um, that sometimes there's a whole long wait because they have to do a background check. You have to do like another pre-check once you get there. So, and the interview was it was a group interview, right? So I ended up getting there like an hour before the interview was over with. Um, and to only to turn back around and drive 2.5 hours to fly back. Um, but it was an experience, right?
yeah.
That nobody talks about. Um, but it's, I think it goes back and talks about, it really speaks to the resiliency
Mhm.
and the grit, because you've shown the resiliency and the grit, right? Having applied to graduate school, three different iterations, and initially having one direction that you wanted to go, end up falling back on school psychology at the same time, still being able to do exactly what you want to do in the long run. And then also the internship process. Um, but as always, the fighter in you that I knew when I was, back in Milwaukee, right? Um, take no prisoners.
Yeah.
uh,
And you're still to this day the only person that ever told me, like, when I was getting my master's, if you get your PhD, you get a master's too. And when I got into my PhD right away, I was like, I'm not getting a second master's. What can I do with my master's degree now to, like, make up for it or something? Because I am not getting a second one. And they were just like, okay. So I got like a semester, like a year off, like, classes covered because of my master's degree. But I was like, I'm not doing two. I don't want two. I just want one. Like, not doing this.
yeah, it's just things that people don't tell you. So I just hope that you continue to give back, and find those other individuals aspiring to go to graduate school to share your story, right? Because
Mhm.
we are where we are based off people who have come before us and poured into us and shared their stories, or just been available.
Yeah.
Because sometimes these unique experiences, unless you've had a unique experience, you really cannot relate, and you still can't fully relate because you're not walking in somebody's shoes. So you could try to empathize as much as possible, but also letting people know, like, hey, yeah, I understand that I won't understand what you're going through, but I'm a listening ear.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And
So
I think that was the benefit of me coming in with already experience, because my cohort was all girls that are straight out of undergrad, and they were just like, I don't know what to do. and
right,
and I was just like, I'm here for you. Like, if you want help, if you want, connections, if you
yeah,
want, like, just ideas, like, come to me. And the grad school environment is kind of cutthroat. I mean, at least my school, it's it's unconscious competitiveness
mm,
that I still, to this day, I'm like, just talk to me, just ask me, like, ask me a question and I'll help you. If you have a
right,
question, say something, like, speak up, like,
right,
let's help each other. Let's not be in our own little, like, bubble to fight each other when we should be
yeah,
helping each other out.
right. And speaking of challenges, right? So I think is one thing I kind of just want to end on, right? As we kind of talk about your experiences, talk about self-care. through the challenges, through this whole process, even though you showed a lot of grit, resolve, and resiliency, right? What are some things that you've done to kind of stay grounded and take care of yourself, your personal self-care as much as possible? Because I didn't learn the term self-care until graduate school. I didn't understand self-care until well beyond grad school. And I'm
Yes.
still trying to incorporate self-care into my daily life. So let's talk about your self-care and things that you've been doing in that regard.
Yeah. No, I agree. I didn't learn what true self-care was until I was real deep in grad school, like
Yeah.
in my PhD. And it's definitely evolved over
Hmm.
time. When I first got here, it was very social, like go out, meet people, like let
Hmm.
me try to do that thing. But then schoolwork would fall behind or research would fall behind. So then it just turned into you know, becoming my own like funny friend that you can like hang out with, where I bought like a sloth onesie, sloth shoes, and
Right.
I would put records on and just dance in my apartment by
Hmm.
myself to make myself laugh. The Office, I swear, got me through all of this on reruns, like just keep watching it over and over
Right.
again. But I will attribute my first 2 years to my therapist. I got my own therapist when I was here. I
Hmm.
was like, I need a therapist to, I can't help anyone if I can't help myself. So
Hmm.
I did that first. And then I was able to transition into becoming the clinician I am.
Hmm.
And now I have a little bit more time now. So it's more working out and
Yeah.
stretching and running. I hate
Hmm.
running, but I'm running now. I tried cross stitch. I still have cross stitch kits I need to do. I adopted a cat. I got a cat. Like I've done it all. And I
Yeah.
think as you, every year it got different. Like
Hmm.
every year it was like, okay, this is not working anymore. I need
Yeah.
to try something else. So
Right.
it was ever evolving, and it's still
Yeah.
ever evolving.
Well, that's what's up. That's what's up. And now you got a big date to plan for now too. So that's even better. That's awesome. Congratulations on that. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, I really appreciate you taking this time, just really sharing your experience and story, and hopefully, those who are watching and listening, will be able to, take something away from this as they continue to pursue graduate school themselves. So, thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, thank you. It was so great to see you. Cause yeah, it's been that long.
Yeah, it's been a minute. It's been a minute.